Hello again, this is Pastor Mike from Twin Peaks Community Church, and today I have a very timely topic to present: what the Bible teaches about our responsibility toward the government. What is the Christian's responsibility toward a secular government? The general rule is we must obey the government because all authority is established by God. Listen to these two verses from Romans chapter 13. Everyone must submit to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist are instituted by God. So then, the one who resists the authority is opposing God's command, and those who oppose it will bring judgment on themselves. Romans 13, verses 1 and 2. It doesn't get any clearer than that. Our main responsibility, the general rule is we are to obey the government because it's been established by God. Now, there are a few occasions in the scriptures where believers chose to disobey the government, to defy the edicts of men, even kings. And these cases of civil disobedience I would consider exceptions to the rule. So there's a few times when Christians should disobey the governing authorities. Let me give you two categories. Number one is when government requires us to do something prohibited by God. When government requires us to do something that God prohibits, then we should disobey. Let me give you a couple examples of that. Remember in the book of Exodus, the Hebrew midwives were told to kill all the baby boys, Hebrew boys in Egypt, but they refused to kill the newborns, and so they disobeyed the government and let those little babies live. Another example of this is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their government, that was Nebuchadnezzar, established that everyone should bow down before a golden idol. And as Jewish young men, they knew they should not worship anything but God. So they disobeyed the law, even in the face of certain death. God rescued them for their disobedience. God rewarded them. Another example of that is Daniel, also in the book of Daniel. He refused to pray to the king. That was the law. For 30 days, everyone had to pray to a king. And so they required him to do something that was prohibited by God, and he resisted. Now, an example of this for today might be, this is just an example, if suddenly the government required us to abort all babies that are born to curb population growth. That'd be very similar to the Egyptian mandate. We would disobey because we cannot abort children. And so there's a time when government requires us to do something that is prohibited by God that we should disobey. Now, secondly, is when the government prohibits us from doing something that's commanded by God. Do you see the difference there? The government prohibits us from doing something commanded by God. Now, we all know the example of the apostles in the book of Acts. They were preaching and they were told not to preach, but they went ahead and preached anyway, and they did suffer. But they said, we must obey God rather than men. So a case like that today might be if the government prohibited us to gather, or prohibited us from singing in church, or preaching, or praying. That would be something that we would defy. Now, our situation here today is complicated by the threat of the coronavirus pandemic. The reason the government is restricting our gathering together is not to squelch our freedom, our religion, but rather to squelch the spread of this deadly virus. I don't believe the church is being singled out any more than restaurants are, or hair salons, or theaters, or sports teams. Pretty much everyone is being restricted for the good of those who might catch this disease. So yes, we could demand our rights. We have biblical rights. We're told to gather, we're told to sing, and we're told to preach and pray. And we have constitutional rights promising us freedom of religion. And so we could practice civil disobedience and demand to go back to church. Or we could graciously yield our rights for now in order to keep people safe. How tragic it would be if we demanded our rights to meet together, then we had an outbreak of this virus among our church family. I met with the elders last night, and we decided to continue our drive-in worship service just as we've been doing. We are expecting warm weather, so feel free to use your air conditioner and listen through your car radio. Let's worship together from the safety of our car. Now the church and restrooms will be open, and we would encourage you, maybe require you, to wear masks when entering the building. For now, it's imperative to keep everyone safe until this virus is under control, that when we do gather and where we gather, that we wear masks. I'm going to close with a wonderful passage from Philippians chapter 2. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Philippians 2, verses 3 through 4. What an appropriate passage. We could demand our rights, but we are deferring our rights from this point, at least for now, so that others might stay safe. Well, this has been a little longer today. I hope you've benefited from this teaching. May God richly bless you.